Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Consultant Acquisition, Procurement, and Negotiations webinar. This morning's instructor is going to be Ryan Asmus. Ryan came through the department through the PE training program, served 2 years in in-house design, 10 years as a squad leader in the in-house design, and for the last 3 has been the DCPME in District 2.
Okay, Ryan, we'll go ahead and turn it over to you and tell us a little bit about consultant acquisition and procurement negotiations.
All right, sounds great. Well, welcome to the Consultant Acquisition, Procurement, and Negotiations webinar. We are well within the webinar series, and the training has been very helpful and beneficial. The goals of this training are to develop a common understanding of the principles of project management applications among the districts, be able to bring new team members up to speed quickly, and to build confidence for success. That's very important to us as a department as we bring new folks in, to be able to bring those new people in and give them the tools that they need for success. The learning objectives. At the conclusion of this session, you will have an understanding of the procurement cycle. You'll also have an understanding of the critical dates and events for procurement. You'll have an understanding of the negotiation process, and also an understanding of the staff hour estimation guidelines. Let me start off by just stating a disclaimer that these are going to be a little different as you go from district to district, but there are similarities. So just keep in mind that it may not be the same for your district as we go through the PowerPoint, but there's going to be some similarities. So where are we in the process? So with a lot of our jobs, our complex reconstruction projects, we start off with a planning phase, and then we move into a programming phase where we're setting up the money, the different kinds of money that we need to be able to be successful with a project. We move into a PD&E to get through the environmental aspects of the project, and then design, right-of-way if needed, permitting if needed, and then to construction. So where are we? Right now, we're at the beginning of the design phase. Some common acronyms that you're going to see being used with procurement and negotiations. There's quite a few of them, and all of them are very important to get a good understanding about what they mean. Professional Service Unit, so PSU, that's a unit that through the negotiations process and through the acquisitions process, you're going to want to make sure that you coordinate with your PSU coordinator. Get familiar with them. Good communication with them is going to be key. Your Professional Services Administrator, that's going to be the one contact that you're going to have from that unit. Conflict of interest, that's going to be something that's ethically a procedure that we have, but also is going to be a form that we will need to sign as we move ahead with the selections of our consultants. Our SINS invoicing system, so Consultant Invoicing Transmittal System, SITS. That's a very important system for us. That's how we pay our bills. Our Disadvantages Business Enterprise, so our DBE. Our Business Develop Initiative, our BDI, that's another important initiative that's been recently a major concern for the department. Our Minority Business Enterprise. Our Technical Review Committee, and we're going to know who those folks are, so our TRC. Our Letters of Response, LORs, and our Automated Fee Proposals, our AFPs, and then our CAT plan, and I'll talk more about that in just a minute. With any project, a successful start of a project starts with good planning. So what's going to be key for you is to go out into the field if time prevails and get familiar with the project site. Identify the major items of work. What is the purpose for the project? Is it a resurfacing project, sidewalk project, reconstruction, traffic operations? There's many different types of projects, but get familiar with the type of project that it is and what the purpose of that project is. Identify the work activities that are needed. Is there right-of-way? Is there permits? Those items are going to be items that affect your schedule, and they're sometimes affecting it by things that you cannot control. So it's good to know those right up front as you start to develop your project. Consider the professional services needed. What are our major and minor work groups? Plan target executions to provide the time needed in the schedule for working through the concerns. So you want to make sure that you have the appropriate amount of time needed to be able to execute your contract successfully. So a CAP plan. So in general, what is our CAP plan? Well, we have different CAP plans. We have a global CAP plan, and then we have a project-specific CAP plan. Our global CAP plan is a part of our performance measures. So the big picture is we tell our legislators how many consultants that we're going to hire and how much money we're going to spend for those consultants. We're measured on how well we meet that. We're measured on a month-to-month basis, and we're also measured on an annual basis. We want to make sure that we keep an eye on those targets so that we can be successful with the execution. Those targets are where setting those targets are where it's critical to understand what concerns you have in your projects. So by understanding what the project needs are, setting those targets to where you have time to be able to work through those concerns and work through those issues. CAP plan schedule dates, you want to make sure that as you work into your project specific that you have those schedule dates on your calendars. And we'll talk more about that. Every district has a standard acquisition plan for an individual project. And there's lots of different events, and we'll talk more about that, built within the execution of the contract. A typical plan ranges somewhere between 24 to 28 weeks, and that's district specific. But what you see here are some of those events that are built within your execution of your contract. A critical thing here, just like what I mentioned before, is that good communication with your PSU coordinator, your PSU administrator, making sure that the maps, that the dates have been mapped out appropriately. So what are some of those events? So our planned advertisement, that typically takes about 2 weeks. And then we move into our advertisement. Well, that's when that cone of silence that we've heard about comes down. For us in our procurement cycle, that's going to be week 1. And then we move into our letters of response, our long listing, our short listing, and then our shortlist selection. And then after that, we move into our technical review committee meeting. And the outcome of this meeting is the long listing and short listing. Then we move into our TRC pre-interview meeting. We discuss interview questions, which would be held as a publicly noticed meeting if it is held after the cone of silence. Then our technical interviews, a one-day event where we are interviewing 3 firms if that's the selection method. And then 2 weeks after that, we have our evaluations from the technical review committee members, and then we send those to PSU. Again, these events may be a little different in your district, but there's a plan that's put in place for how to execute it. And the key here is getting familiar with that plan. And then your final selection, that's at week 13. And then negotiations, which is a 5-week event, and that ends typically around week 24, or week 20, excuse me. And then we execute the contract at week 24, and we're ready to get going with our design with our professional partners. So pre-advertisement, what happens? So again, we mentioned going out in the field, getting familiar with the job. That's critical, that's important. We use that information to develop our stage 1 scope of services and our request for advertisement. There's examples of scopes of services that are on the internet at this link. As most districts do, we have plenty of examples that we have recycled and reused over many years. And so I would encourage you to talk with your district staff and see what scopes are available for different types of contracts and not reinvent that wheel. Just take what, if it's a resurfacing example, take that and modify it to what is project specific for your project. Verify the major and minor work groups. That's going to be something that's needed for the advertisement. Again, coordination with your professional service administrator, find out what those critical dates are, start mapping that out. And then look at your Outlook calendar. Very important to make sure that your Outlook calendar with your vacations, with everything that you can plan out is up to date. That's critical. There's going to be a lot of events that your PSU coordinator will add on to your calendar, so it's important to know that they can find dates that works for all of the TRC members and the project manager as we move ahead. Pre-advertisement. Marketing. Every district handles marketing a little differently. What's the purpose of marketing? Marketing is meeting the teams. It's sharing the information of the project with them. It's discussing their past experiences with similar projects. It's letting them share what they're experts at, letting them tell you what they are really good at, what fits well within their wheelhouse. Marketing meetings can be time consuming. And based on your district's preference, do your best to meet with the teams if possible. Once the planned advertisement site is updated, the consultants will look at it to see where those opportunities are for marketing. The link here will take you to where those planned advertisements are, so you can see this is typically done by your PSU coordinator. So this will show you which projects are out there for advertisement and planned advertisement. And so you'll know when those opportunities for marketing, a lot of the opportunities for marketing that the consultants will want to try to meet with you before that advertisement. So they're going to start targeting dates themselves so that they can meet with you. And this is where you can go and find that information. For a project to move into the advertisement stage, one thing to keep in mind is that a project needs to be on the planned advertisement at least 10 days. We have a lot of projects that kind of drop in throughout the year, and they're sometimes hot potatoes. They come in real fast and they leave real fast because they're driven by a real need. And so those projects we want to make sure that we at least have it up on that planned ad for 10 days. So that's just something to keep in mind. Then we move into the advertisement period. So with the advertisement period comes a cone of silence. So with that, no direct communication between the team and the consultants. All communication is routed through PSU. Procurement advertisement contact. There is a minimum advertisement that's 14 calendar days. And what's going to go with the advertisement is your scope of services, your major and minor work groups, and then you can find those major and minor work groups at the link here. A new contract number, so it's going to be a PSU contract number, also with your FIN number if you have one. the method of selection, and then any special notes to tell the consultants anything specific about the project or any special needs. Selection methods. So there's different selection methods, and the different selection methods are based on different types of projects with different thresholds. The letter of response and interview, that's typically planning, design, PD&E, projects that are under $2 million in design, or $2 million in consultant fees. Letters of response and presentations, that's typically your major PD&E projects, your capacity design, big projects. 5-page expanded letter of response, that's going to be typically your CEI and some design. Your letter of response and abbreviated technical, so we start off with our 2-page letter of response and we shortlist off of that, our letter of interest, and we short page off of that, and then we have a 5-page abbreviated technical follow-up, only of the shortlisted firms. And that's typically your specialty type work, so your bridge inspection and your geotech. All of these procedures can be found in the professional services procedure. So if there's any questions about what selection method you need to use or should use, it's found, the guidance is found in that procedure. If you are using something, a selection method that is for some other kind of selection, there's flexibility with that, but that has to be sent through, normally through your director of production, to the chief engineer for approval. So just to note that if, because of time constraints or other concerns, you may want to try to use a different selection method for a contract, there is that flexibility, but it has to be approved first, and it has to be approved through Tallahassee at the chief engineer. So letters of response. So we get our 2-page letters of response. PSU delivers those packages to your TRC members, and there's some ground rules. The letters of response may not exceed 2 pages. And then there's the minimum font size and margins. So these are important things that to keep in mind. Typically, they're evaluated this based on the font and the margins. They're evaluated by PSU, and before we see that, before your TRC members see that, they're going to let you know if there was a problem with the letter or not. But as you review the letters, from district to district, the preferences are somewhat different. Some districts focus more on teaming. Some focus more on level of detail that's provided in the letter for that project. Some on past experience. It's important to work with your leadership staff to determine what evaluation criteria is most important to the district and use it while evaluating the letters of interest or letters of response. It is also important to ensure that during the marketing meetings, the interest that you're going to evaluate the consultant teams on is shared with them. Remember, you're building a professional relationship with your partner, and communication is key. So we move into our long listing and our short listing. Our long listing is our top 10 firms, and our short listing is our top 3 firms. It's important to note that anyone putting the list together for the long list and the short list cannot be a voting member of the selection committee. The shortlisted firms are the firms that you're going to interview or will present. If the selection is from the expanded letters of response, then the selection will proceed to the final selection. Considerations for long listing. Past performance grades received for similar types of work with the department. The location of the consultant in relation to the work being performed. The volume of the work previously awarded. Other information contained in the letter of response. So, was there spelling errors? Was there grammar errors? How well did they provide how well of a quality control did they provide on their letter of response? Considerations for shortlisting, past performance, the volume of work previously awarded to the consultant, including supplemental agreements within the past 5 years, the distribution of work among competing consultants, and the utilization of the new consultants. So what we want to encourage is economic competitiveness. Workload of each consultant, looking at the number of projects the consultants is shortlisted on and those that they have not been finally selected for. Balancing the needs of the project to the abilities of the consultants. So again, this goes back to during that marketing opportunity where they're explaining what their strengths are to you, what strengths fit within, or what projects fit within their strengths. And their proposed sub-consulting teaming. So how much experience do they have together? How many years have they worked together? Are they good, sound firms that are just coming together to try a new partnership, a new venture, or have they had many, many years? Or is it just a new group and there may be some concern there? So all things that you can use for considerations for shortlisting. Okay, so now we're moving into the pre-interview meeting. So this gives us an opportunity to discuss interview questions and ask, are there any special concerns? It may not be needed on all projects. It gives us an opportunity to go over the questions. With considerations are on how many questions we're planning to ask. Can our teams feasibly complete these questions within the allotted time? Are there any current district issues or project issues that we want to ensure are asked? It is helpful to ask the program manager or the person or the group that is requesting the project, are there any specific needs? The other selection process, you have the technical interviews or oral presentations if this is your selection method. With both of these methods, what's key for you is plan ahead and set some time aside for after the interviews or the oral presentations to be able to reflect on the information that was shared. Try to have this time as close to after the interviews or the presentations as much as possible to help you remember the details. If needed, PSU will have voice recordings that can be listened to help differentiate the teams. Try to write down specific facts and differences in approaches that will help you be able to select the best team and later be able to explain why you didn't select the team. When the evaluations then are due from the TRC, one of the final scheduling steps for the selection process is sending the evaluations to your professional services unit. So the last step in the selection is the ordinal ranking and the final selection meeting. So once all of the technical review committee members' grades are in, this has been submitted to PSU for processing, and the ordinal rank has been determined. Once it's been compiled, then it's sent to final selection to the executive team for approval. It's important to note that as part of a technical review committee member, you are required to be in attendance at this meeting. To approve the selection, it is required to have a quorum, which is at least 2 of the TRC members. And many of the selections, they give you the opportunity to call in. So if it happens to be a day that you're in the field or you're off, you can have that opportunity to call in and be a part of that quorum. Scope clarification meeting. So now we have our winning consultant, and we're moving ahead before we get to our negotiations. So the question is, do we need a scope clarification meeting? Not every project is going to need a scope clarification meeting, but they're very helpful. Their purpose is to get everyone on the same page, to understanding what the scope of work is for this project, and it saves time during negotiations. One of the key things or key aspects of this meeting is, if it's a complex project, is to have all of your stakeholders there so that they can provide guidance, expert guidance on what may be needed for that project. So those folks would include your survey folks, your geotechnical, drainage, structure, and environmental folks. This allows the team the opportunity to get together and to get a clear understanding of the scope of work and what professional services are needed. And the team here is all of your FDOT partners and your consultant team that has been selected as the top consultant moving ahead. So as we move into negotiations, again, it's important to have a clear understanding of what the project scope is. It's always a good idea, if you hadn't had the opportunity to ride the project and understand the issues of the project, that you do it before you go into negotiations. Make sure you, the project manager, have a good understanding of the scope of professional services needed. Review the scope of services and what was requested. There's some guidance in these procedures and these guidelines that will help you. And these are good documents to review prior to going into your negotiations. Remember, we're building professional partnerships. We started that in the marketing. All cards are on the table. How should we handle negotiations, and what should our attitude be? We're not playing games or trying to win with one side losing. We want to be open and honest with your consultant. This is the beginning of a working relationship. Also remember that you have a moral obligation to do the right thing. And this includes being a good steward and being fair with all sides. Remember, we have a professional service that we need, and we have selected the best consultant to negotiate with, and we want to meet the project expectations successfully. So understand what is on the table. So we start our mutual gains negotiation, and that's when we have our poker face, right? No, that's when all cards are on the table. How should we handle negotiations, and what should our attitude be? So here's some key things to think about. Interest. Know what is important. Quality of work, schedule, budget, specific tasks that support the project needs, and negotiate hard for these issues. Understand what's important to the consultants, what their interests are, to serve the client, maybe providing new service to a new area or district, profitability, and support their company. Be understanding of these concerns. They are real, legitimate concerns that our partners have. Options. Be creative. Once you understand your own interest and the interest of your partners, consider where we are likely to agree and where there may be disagreements. Be creative and brainstorm options for interests that may clash. Be forthcoming with your interest. No secrets. Criteria. Be prepared. To be successful, remember, there is a wealth of experience and industry examples that are found on similar projects. Review these examples and get an understanding of the hours for particular tasks to be negotiated on similar projects and project cost for similar projects. Alternatives. Each side should have a good idea of what its best alternative to negotiated agreement is. A strong BATNA, best alternative to negotiated agreements, is real power negotiations. For example, assume that you are buying a car. Once you have done your thorough research, know the worth of the car you want, and have a price in mind, you have all that is needed to be successful in your negotiations. If you cannot reach a deal, you have a good alternative. Your BATNA will determine your walk-away position. Neither the consulting firms nor the FDOT should be forced into poor business deals as a result of negotiations. While the intended outcome for mutual gains negotiations is not that either party walk away, this option should be carefully evaluated and exercised only when necessary. The goal of mutual gain negotiations is to communicate the project concerns and expectations, come to a common understanding, and agree to the level of effort that's involved. Relationships work together. Remember that you are building professional relationships that are going to be working together for the life of the project. Be open and honest about your concerns. Explain your understanding and standpoint. Listen to your partner's standpoint. Consider their concerns and work together. Ultimately, a relationship of trust and respect is established by being clear and honest with the other party. So after the scope clarification meeting with the consultant will submit the modified scope of service, staff hours, fee proposal, audit package. This is the point when the negotiation for the staff hours and the project task begins. So what items are negotiable and what items are not negotiable? Scope of service. Even though a standard scope of service is used, the provisions of that scope are negotiable. The consultant may propose an innovative approach, or the FDOT may have some special concern. Both project managers must understand the scope and be prepared to clarify it as necessary in negotiations. Again, if there's common concerns, a field visit prior to negotiations is helpful in reaching a common understanding of the project issues and requirements. Staff hours. FDOT PMs should prepare an independent staff hour estimate for the project prior to negotiations. The estimate should be developed with consultation from the support offices. That goes back to our stakeholders, geotech, structures, those folks, getting their input. The objective of mutual gains negotiation is to avoid game playing. Deliberately estimating high or low, whether it's the FDOT or the consultant, does not result in mutual gains negotiations. Distribution of staff hours. Distribution of staff hours is negotiable. It is necessary to have all the appropriate staff to support the work needed for the project. This staff typically consists of a range of different employees within the levels of experience. If the consultant is proposing to use experienced higher paid staff for specific tasks, these can be redistributed to less experienced staff members, or the hours can be reduced with the understanding that the more experienced staff can complete the task more efficiently. Staffing. Addition to or the elimination of selected staff members is a negotiable issue. Considerations can be based off of the location of the staff member to the project. Cost of services and rates, and this includes salaries, salary escalation, direct expense, and overhead. These are non-negotiable items. Subcontract cost, the sub-consultant hours are negotiable for most sub-consultants. These hours are typically reviewed by our support sections who need to be included in this process. Both the prime and sub-consultant rates are determined with supporting payroll registers, which are reviewed by the procurement office. Schedule. The schedule will have a direct impact on the project cost. Both project managers should review the schedule carefully to understand the project milestones and delivery dates. If adjustments can be made to the schedule, this is also negotiable. Method of compensation. This includes lump sum and limited amount type methods. This can be used during negotiations if some of the items are uncertain if needed until more project details are available. A typical contract is a lump sum contract. Staff hours. So there's different guidelines for the staff hours. There's the PD&E staff hour estimation guidelines and the estimation forms, and the design staff hour estimation guidelines and design forms. And they're all found on the design support website. This is where you go to develop your own staff hours. You'll want to download these files that you're developing. And this website has both of the guidelines and forms for design and PD&E. Everything that you need is here. As you develop your scope of services for your project, you start communicating the services needed for your project. These services connect with the staff hour task. For example, an item that is included in your project general task of your scope of services, such as public involvement, is connected to your staff hours negotiations, just like what you see here, a clip from your scope of services and your staff hour negotiations. As you estimate your project, you want to also review your scope of services to ensure that you have included all the required items. As with everything that we do, there are disclaimers, and as we start looking at our staff hour worksheets, there's disclaimers. It's important to note that the expectation for each task may not line up with the guidance that's provided. You may take some of the effort out due to information that has been already produced, or need to add more in to meet the objective. The target ranges should be within the project ranges. If the staff hours go outside of the ranges, there needs to be good justification. And it can happen, but there needs to be good justification. For example, a project task is very complex or unique, and automation of a new process has made the work effort more efficient. So as you look into the guidelines for the negotiations on the website and within your design staff hours, there's guidelines that are for all of the following items. The purpose for these guidelines is to help understand how to develop the hours for project tasks based on the type of project. It is important to become familiar with these guidelines prior to negotiating and estimating the staff hours for your project. This will help you explain your expectations for the project and to come to that common understanding. For example, the roadway guidance are based on project type and task, which are required for the project. There is different ranges described in the guidelines. These ranges vary from rural two-lane projects that are very simple and are described by below ranges sections to reconstruction type projects that are new alignments and are considered above ranges. All right, let's look at an example. So let's say that we're looking at our horizontal and vertical task, and we have some project facts. The project length is 3 miles. It's a 2-lane rural highway. We have 12-foot travel lanes, and there are existing 2-foot paved shoulders. So what are our project needs? Well, it starts off as a straightforward mill and resurfacing project. We mill and resurface the pavement, widen the paved shoulders to 5 feet, and other 3R updates. So with our example, going out in the field, we can evaluate, are there any other safety concerns? Drop-offs, clear zone issues. What's the existing cross slope? What's the existing super elevation? What's the existing vertical alignment? Is there any shoulder conditions? Substandard shoulders. Existing bridge railing, does it need to be updated? Drainage system, are there any drainage concerns? Maintenance concerns, are there any concerns that were written into the maintenance scope that came from maintenance? Are there any geotechnical concerns? And sometimes that's found by looking at the existing asphalt surface, if there's patching, and seeing if it's an area that has the potential for unsuitable materials. Well, as we dig a little deeper, and after our field review, we note that we have substandard super elevation for curves. And the project has vertical curves that appear to limit the stopping sight distance. The shoulder widths are 4 feet and should be at least 6 foot based on the criteria. And the side drain pipes need to be reset for positive flow with mitered end sections. So what seems like a straightforward project based on the initial project needs has turned into a project that is a little bit more involved. So as we negotiate, we started off on the low end. So 200 to 280 hours for the first mile, and then 120 to 240 hours for additional miles. So that gives us around 440 hours. But after our review and getting familiar with the project, we now realize that we're in the range that's a little bit higher, which is 250 hours to 330 hours for the first mile, and 160 to 270 hours per additional mile. So again, what seems like is a straightforward project after we go out and review the project has turned into a project that will be more involved. Let's look at another example for signing pavement marking. And this involves the task of 19.4, 19.5, and 20.8. So this is our multi-post sign calculations and panel analysis, and the production of those sheets in guide sign. So based on our project scope, our notes come from our maintenance partners that we need to upgrade and update 4 signs. We go out and we review the signs, and we see that they're actually properly maintained and they're in good shape, so there's no need to replace. Similar to the resurfacing example, we started off with a need for the items 19.4, 19.5, and 20.8. And then after the review, we realized the signs are in good shape, they're current, they're up to date, and there's no time that really needs to be given. So once we've done our homework and we have reviewed the job and developed our own staff hours, we have our idea of what and our understanding of what the expectations of the project are, we have the meeting. With the meeting, it's helpful to select a negotiator. This can be helpful to establish clear roles for all parties. Negotiators should have the authority from their organization to make the decisions. Sometimes during negotiations, staff members focus on different items. Some focus on distribution of work, others on staff hours, others on scope-related items. In these situations, it's good to have a team approach to focus these items collectively. However, one person will still need to lead the negotiations from both sides. There may be situations that need to be vetted up for upper management approval. If this is needed, continue the negotiations on other items to move the process along, and during a break or via email, talk to this manager to get their input. As best you can, keep the process moving along to come to an agreement. Remember, at this point, you have had the opportunity to review the proposed staff hours with your staff, including management, and have gotten their input on what their thoughts are. Start right. Get to know each other. So you're fostering and building a professional relationship. And these meetings can be tense. So move past the business in hand and try to help everyone feel comfortable as best you can. You're striving to create an environment that is open and honest and engaging so that everyone feels as though they can express themselves comfortably. Communicate. A key communication skill is listening, and that's effective listening. As negotiations proceed, earnestly try to understand the other side's viewpoint. Criticizing the other side has no benefit and will shut down the communications. Be direct and honest. Share the information that you have. Don't haggle. Always maintain a professional approach. Negotiations can be stressful, but you should minimize your emotional reactions and be understanding. Apply mutual gains strategy. Throughout the process, both parties should be open to reasoned arguments, not a take it or leave it approach. Both parties should negotiate in good faith. The end result of mutual gains negotiation is to obtain a fair price for both the consultant and FDOT. Document negotiations. There will be many agreements and understandings reached during the process of negotiation. The contract and or the scope of services should be revised to reflect those agreements. These items can also be included in the comments column in the standard staff hours engine estimate forms and can be used to document understandings reached for levels of effort. No gentlemen's agreements. Document all decisions. So success. Once you've worked through the negotiations and both parties have agreed, whether it's time for a handshake or for the millennials a fist bump, you're there. Remember, you're building a professional relationship that will last a couple of years. You don't want to strong arm anyone. You want both parties to feel that they have been treated fairly and walk away as satisfied as best as you can. So closing out procurement and negotiations. Again, we go back to working with our PSU coordinator. So we'll get an audit package in from our consultants, and then we'll have a SITS authorization form. That'll be something that both you and a delegate will sign so that if an invoice comes in while you're absent or out, they can pay that invoice, whether an attestation form is needed. So if the design fee is over $1 million, if it's over $1 million, you'll need that form. Again, work with your PSU coordinator. And then your automated fee proposal sheet. That'll be something that your consultants will send in to you. And then your last step is your operating margins. So bottom line here with these, a lot of these are coordinated with your PSU coordinator. So stay in contact with your PSU coordinator to make sure those final steps in your package, in your contract are closed out. And that final step is the contract is written and the funds, now all those design funds that you've planned for that have been part of the CAP, they can now be executed. You can encumber on them and you can start writing tasks, or you can give the consultant the notice to proceed the work. So the exciting part is you're ready to start design. You're ready to start seeing the change. So with that, that's all that I have for you today in procurement and negotiations. So at this time, if there's any questions that you may have, we'll be glad to answer them. And I want to thank you for the time and thank you for listening.